Welcome, everyone, to another TMI Rewind episode. Now, if you listened to our Firestarter Book Club episode last week, we ended that one with a bit of uncertainty as to what we were going to do for this week's episode. And to add to that uncertainty, one of us has been felled by the COVID virus, and that would be yours truly. So I was unable to get out to the theater so we could review a new movie, so hence the rewind. This week we are revisiting episode 127 from July 2020. This was us in the midst of a summer series. We were revisiting the 1980s, and this particular episode was covering two films from 1987. First up, The Lost Boys, followed by The Monster Squad. Now, if you're curious, and if you want more from listening to this episode, we also did two others. Episode 126 focused on 1985, where we covered Fright Night and Real Genius. And episode 128 focused on 1984, where we covered The Last Starfighter and Top Secret. We do have a plan for next week. We will be back with a new episode, and I can divulge that information if you stick around to the end of this one. I'll be back on the flip side. Thanks for listening as always. So enjoy episode 127, Lost Boys and the Monster Squad.
The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI. Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. Of the Nerd Kind. Of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
So what are we doing first today? Lost Boys and Monster?
Yeah, Lost Boys.
Are we? Okay.
Yeah.
Good Lost Boys.
So does that mean that we're in? I think we're in.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. Welcome back, everybody. And thank you for the Mercy listens. I noticed that about 2 or 3 people listened to the 1982 episode.
Based on the fact that we live with
Based on the fact that we gave it a shout out. We gave it a shout out last week.
And then they're like, no, yeah, there's a reason that people weren't listening to this. It was high concept. We were a little ahead of our time.
We're diving feet first into that high concept again this week. We talked about 1985 last week. This week, we're talking about 1987.
1985. Why does that ring a bell?
Nice segue.
Christina, isn't like your new book take place in 1985?
Good one.
Yeah, we've got to promote it. We've got to promote it for her.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Checks in the mail, baby.
Yes, my new book that is coming out. It's only like 6 weeks away now, unbelievably. The Ghost Tree comes out in September, and it is set in 1985. It is a coming-of-age horror novel set in a small Midwestern town under a curse.
So is the tree really a ghost?
No, it's the name of that's the name that the two girls in the book call it. They call it the Ghost Tree because it looks like
scary.
Mm-hmm. So it's a comedy, in other words.
Oh yeah, it's very lighthearted. Just like all my other books.
Yeah.
Super lighthearted.
You're branching out.
Oh, I'm gonna leave that one alone.
I'm leaving.
Her bark is worse than her bite. Okay, we got no more tree jokes. No.
Crickets, please.
We're hanging out on a limb here. All right, so what are we talking about today?
We're going 1987.
So today we're talking, our main feature is Lost Boys, 1987, directed by Joel Schumacher. Another guy who actually, by the way, made a bunch of good movies, but for some reason is only remembered for his bad movies, which I think is really unfair. When he passed away a few weeks ago, there was a Variety obituary that I thought really was sort of damned with faint praise. They're like, well, he made these classics, but also he made Batman Forever.
He did forever known as Nipplegate.
I forgot that he directed Lost Boys. I had completely blocked that.
Well, when I first saw Richard Donner's name show up, I'm like, wait a minute, he didn't direct this, but yeah, he executive produced it. Schumacher.
Yeah, right. Donner actually was going to direct it because he had done Goonies.
Yep.
But then he decided to go and make Lethal Weapon instead. Anyway, so Lost Boys, it's a vampire story set in the fictional town of Santa Carla, which is clearly Santa Cruz. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't look at it now without thinking of Us as well.
Oh, yes.
Well, yeah, that's the immediate correlation that comes up currently when you watch Lost Boys.
And the story is about family. Mom's recently divorced, Lucy, played by Diane Wiest. She has 2 sons, Sam and Michael. They moved to Santa Carla to live with her father, played by Bernard Hughes. He's wonderful. They are basically trying...
Before we go on, is Grandpa a taxidermist? Before we get off the
that is made very clear that he... I have an
or
uncle
does he just collect dead animals?
No, because there's a lot of carcasses that he was in the throes of. My uncle was a taxidermist, and he would take the head of a rabbit and put it on a kangaroo.
So did his house look like this?
No, not quite. This was a little extreme.
So they moved to Santa Carla, and the kids are really not happy to be there because they've been taken away from their home in Arizona. And basically, the first night out on the boardwalk, 3 members of the family end up meeting people who sort of steer the direction of their narrative for the rest of the movies. Michael, the older son, meets Star, played by Jamie Gertz, and she is a vampire who is not all the way turned, sort of like a half vampire, and she hangs out with a bunch of real vampires led by Kiefer Sutherland as David, and Sam, the younger brother, played by Corey Haim, meets Edgar and Alan Frog.
Not too subtle names there.
Who are 2 kids who ostensibly run a comic book shop with their parents.
That was my question. Do they own the shop?
That was my... I got
Do they manage the shop?
The Frog Brothers,
it appeared their parents are the ones who are always sitting behind the counter.
Is that who those people were?
Yes.
The hippie parents?
Yes, who always seem like they're nodding off. And
they never really moved.
And they are aware of the vampire problem in Santa Carla, and they sort of fashion themselves as vampire hunters.
They are actual brothers. All these years, I just thought that was the moniker that they gave themselves, but that's a family name, Frog.
Yes. Frog. Yes, Edgar Frog and Alan Frog. And then the mom, Diane Wiest, played by Lucy, is also out walking the boardwalk, and she comes upon a video store where there's a help wanted sign, and she meets a guy who seems really nice, played by Edward Herrmann, named Max. And he gives her a job, and he also asks her out on a date.
And hilarity ensues.
And something ensues. Not always hilarity.
They should have just called this movie Michael, because that's pretty much...
I know, it's like Sally from Don't Be Afraid of the Dark.
Right. Michael. 118 times they uttered the word Michael, the name Michael in this.
Did you count or did you look that up?
No, I did. It is on IMDb. But it is...
somebody actually counted.
Yeah. But it's so egregious when, Michael, come on, Michael.
So this was a big hit. This episode is not meant to bring Lost Boys to the masses. I'm hoping that if there's fans of this movie that we're bringing them to this show using Lost Boys.
Yeah. I don't know if you rented from your library, Jim, and I know Christina said that she actually owns this, but I streamed it, and it was like I was watching this movie for the very first time. I mean, I saw it in the theater when it was released, but probably every subsequent viewing has been probably off a VHS tape back in the day. I mean,
this was a big VHS rental.
Yes, and I will tell you, the transfer and the color just was absolutely gorgeous.
As you said, I did get it from my library, so it was the 2-disc special edition. It was DVD. It was not Blu-ray, so it was from the early aughts.
I was blown away by the level of detail. Like I'm checking out comic book covers in the back when you know in the video store, there's a Goonies poster. I mean, you're checking all this stuff out that you probably maybe could have made it out on a VHS tape if you paused it or whatnot. But
did you check out that steamy Rob Lowe poster? He's a big fan of St. Elmo's Fire. Apparently.
Joel Schumacher directed,
which he did.
I know, but that's I get it that it's a little in joke, but it's like it's a friggin' 14-year-old bedroom boy. He doesn't need.
Well, he did have Reform School girls also.
He did have Reform, and wasn't that Molly Ringwald? There was also a Molly Ringwald.
Yeah, there was.
Or maybe Sam's character is just more sexually fluid than you think he is.
Probably, maybe. Well, those clothes.
He's young. He's still finding his identity.
I will tell you, this movie genuinely made me miss the 80s.
It is so late 80s.
Entrenched in the clothes that Sam is wearing.
Right.
Like, that's a crap I was finding when I was in college. It's just not so much the music, but just like, you see the hairdos and you see the punks and they're all hanging out in the record store and the video store. And you're just like, yeah, not to that level. I didn't hang out on a beach somewhere.
So since this is Christina's pick, what are you bringing to the table here in terms of 80s and your memories of this and the first time that you saw it, this movie?
I loved this movie, but I didn't get to see it until it was out on video. Again, because it was rated R.
It was rated R. Yeah, you couldn't go in.
And I couldn't go in. And
you could if you tried, probably. But
my parents did not bring me to rated R movies. And I think I mentioned in a previous show that the first time I saw a rated R movie in the theater was Young Guns, which was a year later. So
still can't believe that was rated R.
I know, right?
I mean, once I saw this, I loved it. I was one of those kids who was really, I was always looking for anything that had a fantastic element in it.
Well, this one does right off the bat.
And pretty much the entire cast ripped from the pages of Tiger Beat magazine.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody had seen Corey Feldman and a ton of stuff at that point.
Right. Well, Goonies was just,
Stand By Me was out for a year.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Which was Kiefer Sutherland is in Stand By Me as well.
Yeah.
Playing pretty much the same character.
Just with longer
Just without
hair.
the teeth. Yeah.
The longer hair.
It's funny, too, because Kiefer Sutherland, we talked about this with Val Kilmer last week. Kiefer Sutherland's one of those actors. You just look at him and you knew even then he was inevitably going to be a star.
Right.
He just had that thing, that sort of indefinable quality that makes him memorable.
He's also so reminiscent of his father. You're getting that, but it's not like that's the reason that he's in movies. He's bringing his own thing to it, but he also had the gravitas of having that Sutherland bloodline, and he looks so much like Don, and his delivery is a lot like him as well, but he has his own acting chop. Big reason why Lost Boys is so memorable is because of him.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because it's a very one-dimensional character, but he sort of gives it more layers than are written there. He puts more stuff into the character than I think is actually on the page.
And he doesn't have a huge amount of dialogue.
No, not
a lot
at all.
of it is just
and more,
his visual
more than the rest of the group. All they do is cackle, really.
Yeah.
I was trying to describe it to my son. I'm like, he just has that thing, it's the
just,
thing that all actors want, that they
that
want
spark.
That right. It's like almost like they have chemistry with the audience, but they're pushing it through the camera.
And with the camera, he's got a quality about him.
Yeah. So you almost feel bad for Jason Patrick, who was the ostensible star of the movie, right? It's also supposed to be
overshined,
about him. And Jason Patrick didn't want to do this movie.
No.
He auditioned.
He was afraid that it was going to be like an exploitation horror, which it is, but it's it grows above
a lot of the violence is until the one scene where they actually feed. The violence is all implied, and that's a brilliant, like the opening sequence where it's just the aerial camera shot as you fly in over the boardwalk. And you got that. It's a really weird sound mix of
that damn song. I have had that song stuck in my head.
Cry Little Sister.
Brilliant,
yes,
but it works so efficiently because you never until the end sequence where Michael and David duke it out in the house and you actually see them fly. You never really see them fly, but they're flying because of this camera work, and it's a cheap way to get this point across, because it's just a helicopter shot. Now they'd probably use a drone, but it works to such great effect, and it just immediately sucked me in. Like I'm excited to watch this damn movie again. Just that opening over the beach coming into the boardwalk.
The DP on this movie was Michael Chapman, and he was like a really high profile DP. Like he had done Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. He'd been the camera operator on Jaws. He'd done all these really sort of highbrow kind of movies, and Schumacher asked him to do it, and he was surprised he said yes.
I know. It was almost like Schumacher was apologetic. Like, yeah.
All right, listen, I ain't got this movie.
But he didn't know that this guy was such a horror movie fan that he was just like chomping at the bit to do a vampire movie or a werewolf. He said that on the interview that I watched, it was like he's always wanted to do a vampire or a werewolf movie. He never got to do a werewolf, but this is his vampire movie.
Right. And because of that, I think the camera work is one of the things that really distinguishes this film.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
It's very dynamic. And like Jeff said, you see almost like point of view shots from the perspective of the vampires, so that you see them sort of swooping down on their victims.
Yeah, because you just see the reaction from their victims, right? Especially the security guard at the beginning there, and it's just like you don't need to show them flying because it's going to be just them hanging on wires. So it is such a great effect.
And I love the opening sequence, the initial sequence when the family's first driving up and they see the boardwalk, and you get this almost like slice of life thing of all these different kinds of people who are on the boardwalk. And it's pretty subtle, but there's always sort of in the background these missing child posters.
They're all over the place. Yeah, it's crazy. Yep.
So it's like there's definitely, and you sort of see again like this sort of juxtaposition of like, this is like a beautiful place where people have fun, and then there's like this sort of really seedy underbelly. There's like kids digging in the trash for food.
Yeah. Well, immediately as soon as they get into the boardwalk, and then you got the big welcome to Santa Cruz or whatever, and then on the other side, the murder capital of the world, somebody has spray painted it.
Right, Santa Carla.
Santa Carla.
Santa Carla.
Carla.
It is Santa Cruz, but for the movie, it's Santa Carla. I like that. This is almost like a horror movie trope. Sort of like the circus boardwalk, like fun fair kind of thing where it's supposed to be hiding, like that's hiding something dark underneath. Like obviously the first story that comes to mind is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. But like a ton of horror stories and horror movies have used this trope, because there is something about that. This is supposed to be a place where families have fun, and then underneath it, there's this, this scary thing.
And I think most of that stuff is still standing. I think the comic store was destroyed in an earthquake, but it's been since rebuilt and it's further down. But
there's a couple of scenes here when the boardwalk shuts down, when all the lights go out, and then you're just left with that boardwalk, and what goes on after the lights go out.
Right.
Under the boardwalk. They'll suck your blood. Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
So when was the first time you saw this? Was this like a sleepover?
Yeah. This is like a video release.
This is a girl sleepover. Well, rewind it, Patrick.
Right. First of all,
Kiefer. I'm Team Kiefer.
It's it's a vampire movie. It's a horror movie. Second of all, it's full of like hot guys in leather jackets. So
well, let's talk about that saxophone player.
This is like
the saxophone player. I was like, that bugged me then, and it bugged me now. I'm like, come on, stop showing this guy.
If Sam can embrace his feminine side, you can embrace yours, Jim.
I didn't think so. It was over the top, and I'm all for embracing whatever. But
like that. Like your men all muscly and oiled,
and so full of themselves. No, it is not. I'm like, please stop feeding this guy's ego and get him off.
That crowd was eating out of his hands. You mentioned before the fact, so they're moving here because they left Arizona. Because once again, you can't have an '80s movie where the dad is present. Apparently, dads were not cool in the 80s.
Dads are not cool, yeah.
Dads are not cool. So it's always got to be a broken family. That's your schism right there.
Well, the thing is that the brothers, once Michael is almost on his way to the dark side, and Sam has to step up and become the patriarch of the family.
Right.
So he's the one that's kind of holding everything together. So it's the hero story. So it's important to not have the dad, that Sam has to step up and try to save his brother.
Right. And they don't think, like, it never occurs to them to talk to their grandfather, which is a mistake.
Right. But
they have to get him out.
That's a great comedic effect. It's probably one of the best endings to a movie ever. And I did read that was not the original ending.
Well, if he knows what's going on, stick around and help him out, you know?
He's just, Grandpa's, he's looking to hook up with the Widow Johnson down the street.
Widow Johnson, yeah.
See, now because the back of his truck is full of steaks, we actually speculated that he's off hunting. Like, that's what he's doing at night. He's not actually dating. He's out, trying to solve the vampire problem.
He did say at one point to Michael, looks like I'm not the only one who got lucky last night.
So we're assuming that even after Max and David and the gang are dead, there's more vampires in San Francisco.
Hell yeah, there's got to be.
These aren't the only ones.
There was two sequels. There was But yeah, you can't imagine that there's only 4 vampires in the entire city.
One thing that I was trying to pay attention to see if it came up. Corey Haim was 16 when he made this movie, but he seems younger, doesn't he? He seems like he seems
very young.
13 maybe, or 14.
And this was obviously the very first movie of the 2 Coreys.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? I kept having the urge to reach into the screen and close his mouth. His mouth is always open, even when he's not talking.
That's how he acts. Slack-jawed.
It's like there's flies that are going to fly in there if you don't close that. Come on.
Although I absolutely loved it when he schooled the Frog Brothers on the comic books. I'm like, he's a nerd, like a straight up, just a nerd. When he came to the comic books, I said, all right, I'd hang out with that kid then.
He'd have to lose that floor length Miami Vice jacket, though.
Oh man, he'd have like I said, it just takes me back.
Now this was 1987. In a lot of ways, to me, was like the nadir of the 80s. I think. And now this movie, I think in its time, I didn't like The Lost Boys. I was not down with The Lost Boys. Not because it was a horror movie and I didn't like horror movies. I love horror movies in the 80s. But I went to the movies to escape from long-haired, mulleted jerks.
I thought it was prepubescent teen girls.
Long-haired, mulleted jerks were in abundance in my day-to-day existence.
So you paid money to get berated by David?
Long-haired, mulleted jerks. I tried to avoid them at all costs. And me going to the movies to hang out for 2 hours with them was not on my, I didn't see The Lost Boys until it came out on video. I watched it once.
Wow.
I was like, I'm not gonna become a fan of this. It was, I was entertained by it, but I didn't seek it out. So I enjoyed it much more on this viewing. That baggage was in my past.
I don't know. Did you really get rid of that baggage?
Not really.
Oh, it sounds like it's sitting right there on your shoulder.
But
oh man.
But it was, I admit it's a fun ride. So
it's like I said,
I took it for what it was, right?
Yeah, watching this again, the bike scene where they're racing through the beaches and the music that's pumping. I mean, it is quintessential 80s, but it's just like you just go with it. Like it's just. It's very atmospheric. They're bordering on cartoon characters, but I absolutely was enthralled. It was almost like I was watching again for the first time, even though I know the dialogue inside and out. And there's some great lines that get spouted out in this thing. But I really, really enjoyed it watching it this time.
Yeah, I enjoy it every time.
Yeah,
I think.
Did you say it was one of your husband's favorites?
Yeah, this is one of his favorites for sure.
Yeah.
He loves especially the Frog Brothers. I think they're so great because they're playing it so straight.
Yes,
the two of them, like they never kind of like break character.
No, and Feldman's got that fake. That
he was doing the Christian Bale Batman voice
before Christian Bale even knew. He's like, Christian Bale's watching this movie one day and he's like, son of a bitch, I'm going to steal that.
And everything he says is funny, but it's like unintentionally funny.
Right.
And like one of my favorite lines is when they go in to stake the vampires, and for all that they style themselves as like big vampire hunters, they clearly have never done this before.
They've never done it before.
They're actually on the phone with Sam. They're like, you're just going to have to kill your brother. Bro.
This is all conjecture.
Like, you'll feel better. They're like, well, I can't kill my brother. You'll feel better. Let's do it.
But they come out and, they're all covered in goo because they just killed poor Alex Winter.
Yeah.
And
Bill S. Preston.
Corey Feldman, says, it's not our fault. They pulled a mind scramble on us. They opened their eyes and talked.
Yeah, this has a lot of funny lines.
Mm-hmm.
I love the flying nun line when Jason Patrick is floating and grabbing onto the phone line so he doesn't float up into the sky.
Right. He made a comment about blood-sucking Brady Bunch because at the end when Max is like, we want to be one big happy family. Yeah, there's some great lines in there. You're a blood-sucking vampire, Michael. Wait till Mom finds out. Like just silly stuff. And it just kind of like goes. Just we were talking last week with the real genius. Going back, like I said, the transfer that I watched, when they go to their lair, the amount of detail that's going on in that set is unbelievable. Now, do you believe that really this was a hotel that's been abandoned since like 1906 and they just procreated it? There's a lot of land there on the shore. I'm sure someone would have taken it over by now, but
I was convinced that the exterior was the same set that they used for Planet of the Apes, but it is not. But it does look very reminiscent of that beachside set.
Yep.
Let's get into some of the vampire lore that they play.
Yeah, because
loose with.
They do. I was going to bring up. Okay, go ahead. Yeah,
because there's a major cheat when Max comes over to dinner, and they give him the whole. They're looking at him closely. They give him garlic. The dog is not snarling at him, and then he just drops a little bit later. Well, you invited me in, so you can't do anything to me while I'm in this house. Yet they stake him while he's in the house, right?
Yeah, Grandpa did. But maybe he wasn't invited that time. Do you have to be invited every time, or once you're
maybe
invited?
Maybe they revoked the invitation.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, license revoked. But even to that end, so one of the most iconic scenes in this movie is when they first bring Michael into their lair, and they're eating Chinese food, and the rice turns to maggots, which is still like a gross out scene, and then the noodles become worms. If David has this ability to screw with your mind, like why didn't he use that power again at any point to just take over Michael, especially when they were fighting at the end, when they were taking out his guys one by one with holy water squirt guns?
So like a Mysterio deal?
Something. I mean, but it was set up that he has this ability to screw with your mind.
I felt more like maybe he had the power of suggestion if you were susceptible to that, but by then Michael was not
too far onto his
and
own side.
It's limited to Chinese food.
Right. And only takeout, sorry. Yes. What are you gonna make these wontons into?
And they didn't stake him with a wooden stake either.
No, it was the antlers.
It was the antlers they did.
Deer antlers.
And that was because
antelope antlers.
He was supposed to be in a sequel. So
they wanted to keep it open so they could possibly bring him back.
Right. So like he ends up on the antlers and he's the only one whose body isn't destroyed. Like he doesn't crumble or anything. So like he just sort of reverts. He looks like a young boy again almost, because they shave off his beard. And
is that part of the vampire? Like when you become a vampire, you get 5-day-old George Michael scruff.
And an earring, apparently.
Yeah, well, that's a prerequisite in the 80s. But like all it took for Michael to become a vampire is to drink blood out of a bottle. No one had to bite him. No, like that's all it takes.
And Star tells him that it's blood. And then a little bit later on, what did you tell me? She did. She said it was blood, and you still drank it.
Jerk. I blame him for everything.
Sure, because at that moment he was being manipulated by like that stupid guy thing where all the guys are saying, do it.
And she's behind him. That's blood, Michael.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Whatever.
Yeah. You see that little kid behind me? He's 110 years old. Don't do it. He's always going to have a 4-year-old pee-pee. Jason, Patrick, and Jamie Gerst were in Solar Babies together.
That's the reason why she's in this movie.
He brought her in. It is not a good movie by any means.
I didn't even know it was a movie.
Yeah, well, there you go. Learn something new every day.
And it's kind of funny when you think about Jason Patrick, like being worried about being in this movie when he had done Solar Babies.
Right.
I know.
Now you're worried about damaging your career.
It's hard to accept that everybody, with the exception of Corey Feldman, was kind of a newcomer.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland had just finished Stand By Me when he came on The Lost Boys, and that was the first time we'd really seen him, was in Stand By Me. Jason Patrick, obviously. Alex Winter, not on the same level as those two, but, Bill and Ted hadn't happened yet, and I think this was his first big screen role. And the two Coreys hadn't really gone off on their Abbott and Costello journey yet, where they were making movies together. So Feldman was probably the biggest name out of the kids, at least.
But yes, we can't talk about I mean, Grandpa steals this movie. Grandpa's the greatest thing. Now, did Grandpa have the old fart shelf in his refrigerator before they arrived, or did he make it knowing that they were going to come?
I think
like, who would have that there if you lived in the house for yourself for 18 years?
I think he was probably trying to stake his claim on his junk food.
I guess so. He knew these little punk kids were going to come up. And there's that great, the first thing that Sam wants to know is where's the TV?
Where's the TV?
And
no
Grandpa
TV. No MTV.
Right. But Grandpa gets TV Guide, and he reprimands them about, pulling the label off the cover or whatever. But I used to work with this woman who her Wednesday night revolved around the new issue of TV Guide arriving. And she would go through it, read it, circle everything that she was going to watch that week. And that was like her evening.
Well, that's what I did. I would get the new TV Guide. It came out on Tuesday in the grocery store.
Oh, okay.
So I would always have it
maybe
on
Wednesday
Tuesday
in the mail. Yeah.
and look at all day Saturday, all day Sunday to see what horror movies they were going to be playing on 11 PIX or WOR.
I was going to say, then we only had 13 channels.
Yeah.
14 if you had
and of course Cheers and Jeers. You can't read the TV
Cheers
Guide
and Jeers,
without going through Cheers and Jeers.
That's true. Did you always do the crossword puzzle?
Yeah, I always did.
There you go.
Attempted it anyway.
It's not the same anymore. No. Too many. Those books would be massive.
One of the things we haven't talked about yet is Greg Cannon's vampire makeup, which is really
subtle.
Great.
It's not over the top. It's not. Their personalities still come through.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just like prosthetic
It
monsters.
looks a lot like the Buffy look that they used years later for Buffy the Vampire Slayer and those vampires.
And he said there's a little documentary about his makeup on the disc that I have, and he talks about how it's just basically like a forehead piece, a cheekbone piece, and then they had the contacts. So it looks like it's a lot more makeup than it actually is.
Right.
But yeah, it still allows them to emote, and like you're not spending hours in the makeup chair like we talked about last week with Chris Sarandon spending 8 hours to do the makeup on Fright Night. They shot it and lit it so well that it really transforms the actor's face.
And you get those little, like when they're hanging upside down sleeping, you just see that, you see his foot. So it's not
those are the nastiest feet. Those were
Kiefer's real feet, by the way. Sorry to tell you, that was not a special effect.
He's got to go to a podiatrist to get those nails cut.
Right. Oh man, I enjoyed watching it. I was very happy. But again, you said it was R, but there's really nothing. I mean, at the end, there's some egregious blood blasting out of the toilet and sink, but couple impales, but nothing worthy.
Were there any F-bombs? I don't recall.
I don't remember hearing the F-bomb. There is a lot of naughty language. Even in Monster Squad, there's some body talk.
Yeah, that was surprising. Did you notice the cocoon line that Kiefer gives? You don't get old, you don't ever die. I was expecting Wilford Brimley to come up with his arms around the guys. Don't get old, you don't ever die.
You just get diabetes.
And I also noticed at the video store, filled with Warner Brothers movies, because this is obviously a Warner's movies. All you saw was that old style Warner clamshell case on the shelves.
Why are you going to promote someone else's movie?
I know, exactly.
Screw that. You can actually go and get your picture of that comic book. What is it? Vampires Everywhere. That the Frog Brothers tried to give Sam early in the movie. It was a prop made for the movie itself, but it exists, and you can go to the comic store and you can take your picture with it. And it's signed by the whole cast on the inside.
Really?
That's cool.
So you can go. Yep. Owner will let you take a picture with it.
Wow, that's probably worth like $1 zillion now because
with all these people touching it. Yeah.
Well, no, I was just thinking like Edward Herman's passed away, Corey Haim's passed away, Joel Schumacher's passed away. Like, there's a lot of people who worked on this film who are not with us anymore.
And you had brought up Goonies before, and it's funny that this got made on the strength of Goonies. And it was originally going to be modeled to be a much younger cast a la Goonies.
Yes, right, yeah.
Right. It was supposed to be something more... Schumacher described it as Goonies Go Vampire. He said, it was supposed to be like a very sort of G-rated thing where it was a bunch of kids who were vampires. And that was why Donner was going to be involved. And it was actually when Donner decided to pass and go and do Lethal Weapon, his wife, who's a producer, said, you should bring in Schumacher. And when Schumacher came in, like, he wanted to make it like teenage vampires and make it sexy. And so the whole thing kind of sort of underwent this transformation. And, the movie, has some plot holes, but I think overwhelmingly it's sort of carried along by like the stylishness of it, sort of all the elements that come together, the look of it and the music and the cast. And it just has like, again, like, that sort of lightning in a bottle quality that all movies are trying to achieve, where everything sort of comes together magically.
Yeah, no, it works so well. It really, and it holds up. It really does hold up. And this thing was filmed in 3 weeks. They filmed it in 3 weeks.
Wow. And it does really, it's one of these rare movies that perfectly captures its time. So that's why it's so iconic. It was huge that summer, I remember. July 31st, 87, it was released. $8.5 million budget, and it made $32 million, which is huge.
Pretty big, yeah.
So, it is one of the pillars of 80s cinema.
Yeah.
And some of these 80s movies are just so day-glow, it's unrealistic. But this almost kind of captures what it was like to be alive then. It's obviously, you're not fighting the undead, but just some of the scenery and the clothes, it does bring you right back. Sometimes that's a painful memory. Sometimes it's happy.
I was immediately transported back.
Going into it, I probably would have given it 2 buckets because I haven't seen it in a long time.
Wow.
Because I have very negative memories about Lost Boys. But looking at it now, I'd go up to 3. I was entertained.
I'd go a solid 4.
Yeah, this is a 4 for me.
Yeah.
Because I've watched it many times in the intervening years.
Yeah.
Right.
And by the way, love that Echo and the Bunnymen cover of People Are Strange. So
Good
the
stuff,
the soundtrack is like really, I think, very iconic.
Did you ever have the soundtrack?
Yeah, I had it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's some dead silence right there.
Yeah. So Jim's going to fill that in that space with the chorus of "Cry Little Sister."
Thou shall not fall. I was like, I was actually looking at the soundtrack track listing. I'm like, is there just a choral version of that song, or that's all it is the kid singing?
That's to great effect, though.
It is, and as soon as I heard that, it brought me right back to watching this on VHS for the first. That is so in itself is so iconic. That song. Yeah. It is forever tied to this movie. You cannot separate the two.
I forgot. So the guy who wrote that song is producing a musical version of Lost Boys for the stage.
A musical version.
A musical version.
I wonder how many times they're going to sing Michael.
Oh.
They better have a song called Oh Michael.
And I didn't realize that there were sequels to this until I was just looking up some stuff online, because on the bonus features, it was before those direct-to-video sequels were made. So they were, talking about what a Lost Boys sequel might look like, and everybody was saying that there was a script for Lost Girls, which would be, I think, really interesting. And I don't know if it was going to bring back any of the characters, if the Frog Brothers were coming back or what have you.
Frog Sisters.
But who knows? But
Toad
they never,
Sisters.
for one reason or other, that never came to be.
Yeah, I feel super sad that Schumacher never got to make that. He was really keen on the idea of doing like a girl vampire motorcycle gang. I think that probably would have been really, really fun.
All right.
That's my stereo.
So let's move on. Let's go to the concession stand.
Oh, do they have rice and noodles?
And we'll come right back with Monster Squad.
Oh, I float through the air with the greatest of ease, with or without the flying trapeze. My act is so great, gravity I defy, while I bring C-O-D-D-Y.
Yes, Toddy, the chocolate malt in a can.
Minute, everybody. It's time to drink your chocolate toddy.
Mmm, delicious.
So now we're talking about Monster Squad.
Monster Squad. Which you've never seen before, by the way.
I've never seen this first viewing.
That's crazy.
First viewing.
So this actually came out like the day before my birthday in 1987. I definitely remember going to see this in the theater because it was PG-13, so I could do that. Ryan Lambert, who plays Rudy, was the number one reason why I wanted to see this movie in 1987. As a 13-year-old, I had actually spent the previous few years watching him on a show that was on Disney Channel called Kids Incorporated. He was like literally a preteen idol. And I had lots of pictures cut out of him. And
Tiger Beat.
yes. And I loved Ryan Lambert. I wonder now, because there's a lot of theaters now that like rerun this and they bring the cast in and stuff. And, they're signing autographs. I wonder like how many middle-aged women come up to him. We're like, I loved you so much when I was 13 or 14 or whatever, because he was cool, for that age, when I was that age, like he was the coolest thing. I definitely went to see this because he was in it. That was the primary reason. I'm sure that this wouldn't have even been on your radar because you guys were older than me. So
no, I did not see this in the movie theater.
Yeah, that's why, I knew about it. Obviously, if you were a movie fan, you knew it was coming out. But because it didn't have the actual Universal monsters, it had like a facsimile of
they were close enough
what they were, and it seemed like a kid's movie. I had no interest in seeing it.
And that was one of the reasons why it didn't do as well in the theater, because Lost Boys had come out like 2 weeks before.
Right.
So kids who were a little bit older would have gone to see Lost Boys. Yep. And kids who were my age or younger, who were sort of the target audience, apparently the initial trailer that was cut made it look scarier, like made it look more like a horror movie. So parents might not have wanted to take their slightly younger kids to the movie. So it was the kind of thing that really didn't find its audience in the theater. It found its audience later, in the
videos.
In video, like a lot of stuff does. Yep. So Monster Squad, the plot was, I use the term loosely, basically there's a bunch of kids who have a sort of a little horror club. They love all things related to horror. And they discover that monsters are real, that Dracula is like reforming the gang, right? With Frankenstein's creature and the mummy and Gilman from Creature from the Black Lagoon and the Wolfman, and they're all gonna come to this town to find an amulet and take over the world. And the kids are the only ones who are aware that this is happening, and so they have to stop it.
Because, of course, the parents never believe the kids.
Right, of course.
Of course.
Very, very much in the spirit of a lot of the kinds of movies that came out at this time, like The Goonies, like where, there were kids who were sort of, or E.T., like where the kids are sort of in their own world, having their own adventures, and like parents are really not a part of this. This would never happen now because parents monitor their kids so closely.
Right. Yeah. Well, half of these movies would be ruined by a cell phone because that's all it would take.
You find yourself asking as a parent, like, where are they? Where's the parents during when this is happening? Or do they have no interest in what they're doing?
That's what, I said before, these movies where they portray the parents as like idiots.
But that always
drives me nuts now.
When I was a kid growing up in the 80s, my parents used to just send me out like on my bike all day.
Oh, yeah. They didn't care.
Yeah, be home until
it was dinner time. Until it was dinner time.
Right.
Yeah.
They gave me a watch. I remember like that was like the entryway into me being allowed to go out all day. Like you have to be home by a certain time. I had a watch and I had to make sure I was home by a certain time. But they didn't. I mean, like you could be gone for 6 hours.
Right. Yeah.
Didn't care.
Nobody's calling the neighbors checking in on you.
Well, that was part of it, though, is that everybody kind of knew their neighbors. So it was like everybody knew, even if it didn't seem like they were watching, they were all kind of knew where you were.
I wasn't supposed to, because I lived on a pretty busy street, and I wasn't supposed to cross the street up until a certain age. And I remember playing a game in somebody's yard, and the ball went across, it rolled out and across the street. And I, looked both ways, and I went out and got it. And within 10 minutes... I think my mother was there because somebody in that
ratted you out.
Had told her, like, he's crossing the street.
Yep. They reported on you.
Yeah.
Script co-written by Shane Black, who, by the way, had a huge year in 1987 because he also wrote Lethal Weapon, which came out the same year, and he was in Predator, which came out the same summer.
Yes.
Directed by Fred Decker. So let's talk about the funny joke. So it was co-written by Black and Decker.
He was cool though, because there was special features on my DVD, and he was talking about. I think he had your dad, because his dad used to drag him to the drive-in, and he was a very nerd. He was a nerdy
You're
guy.
talking about Decker, right?
Decker's.
Yes. Yeah, I liked. I had the bonus features as well, because I had managed to get the Blu-ray copy of this.
Oh yeah.
The anniversary edition, right?
Mine was the 20th anniversary.
Yeah, because the anniversary edition, which is like completely out of print, is the only version that has special features.
The version that's available now, if you were to buy this now, it has no features whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's a Blu-ray, but it's got no
weird.
features.
Why?
I know. And for the longest time, like this movie I was reading was released on VHS initially when it was first out of theaters. In 1988, it came out on VHS, and then it was out of print for like a decade. The studio and the makers of the movie didn't realize that this cult was forming around it, and it didn't come out on DVD until, I don't know, 2006, 2007, around then.
Right, and that was because of the Alamo Drafthouse revival.
Yeah.
Where they did a showing of the movie, and they asked the cast to come, so like Andre Gower, who played Sean, and Ryan Lambert, who played Rudy, and Ashley Bank, who played Phoebe, and a couple other people went down to do the showing at the Alamo Drafthouse, and they were like, there'll be like 10 people here.
Right,
They thought there would be nobody. And the show 2 nights in a row were completely sold out, because there was this massive, massive following of people who'd loved this movie when they were kids.
Yeah.
And that was when the studio was like, oh, wait.
What have we been sitting on here?
People want to see this.
Yeah, and it's only 82 minutes.
Yes.
So it's a drop in the hat. For a kid to hold your attention, you're in and out.
What's funny is that there's an interview with Ryan Lambert all throughout the bonus features of this. And he was talking about that showing at the Draft House. And when he got the call to come, he's like, why? He's like, who's going to show up to this?
Is this pranking me?
By the way, Ryan Lambert, gorgeous then, gorgeous now. Still like the coolest guy. When you see him in interviews, like he's always like wearing like Close Encounters of the Third Kind shirt or like Clockwork Orange shirt. I told my husband, I was like, he was my boyfriend then and he's my boyfriend now. Okay, he's still my boyfriend. I love his character in this movie actually, because he's the kind of character who I think in other movies might be the bully. He might be the kid who beats up on other kids, but instead his introduction's so great. He's sort of like this defender of the weak.
Right.
He shows up and saves Horace from the two kids.
It was a bizarre character because you don't see something like that portrayed a lot because everybody's in their wheelhouse in movies like this. Yeah. So he's crossing lines. So you're thinking, why is this kid hanging around with these younger kids? But then in the bonus features, it was kind of explain, well, maybe he's got family issues. He's looking for a family, something to belong to.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't have.
And he's so sort of cool and above it all, right? So like he sort of has held himself separate from other kids that might potentially seek him out. But there's a sort of a throwaway line that Phoebe says when you first meet him. And she says, I heard he killed his dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's, as a throwaway line, it's meant to be comedic, but it definitely implies that there's something else going on in the background, something else going on, like with his family life and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it makes you think that maybe in the script it was fleshed out a little bit more as to explain his character that just never made it into the final movie.
And obviously, nobody would have survived this movie without Rudy, because he's the only kid who brings any practical skills to this monster home.
Right.
All right. He makes all the steaks. He makes the silver bullets in shop class.
Yep.
Yeah. How did he had a mold for bullets in shop class?
There's some questionable things going on. At one point, Dracula's staff has jumper cables coming out of it.
But that's, this movie, it gets a pass because I think it's a weird combination of a kid's movie and a horror movie. And kids' movies don't demand the magnifying glass that you put other movies under, because it's just going to happen. It's this is meant to be like a stream of consciousness kind of on a kid's level type thing, but it's weird because it's not at the same time, because there's some pretty scary, heavy stuff in certain scenes of this. So it's a movie that I think is trying to find its own identity.
And I think you talk about scary, heavy things. Again, just sort of the implication of it, like scary German guy who's never choose anything else except scary German guy. And the kids are, they have to go to his house because he's, this sort of, he's a boogeyman in their eyes, right? He's a guy, like an old guy who lives in their house, and he just peeks out the curtains. And the kids have to go to his house because they have this diary that's in German. That just
happened to be written in German.
And they need to have it translated, and he's the only German person they know. And they're standing outside and like, what's German for please don't murder us?
Right.
And he shows up and he says it. He says the German for please don't murder us. And then the kids go in the house, and of course it turns out he's actually a sweetheart German guy.
Nice guy. Misunderstood German dude.
He's like giving them pie, and he's translating the diary. He's honestly being very tolerant of like these random neighborhood kids.
Well, probably nobody has ever wanted to talk to him before.
Right, correct. How do they even know he was German if they never talked to him?
They probably steal his mail.
But then, the kids are leaving, and they say something about identifying monsters, and he says, that he knows, what monsters are, and he closes the door, and you see his concentration camp tattoo. So there's like sort of this implication that, again, there's sort of like this whole life kind of behind this movie. It makes sense then kind of why he gets involved, why he stays involved, why he helps the kids, even at the end, like, he very determinedly stands up to Dracula and all this kind of stuff, because he's seen real horrors, and he's
correct.
He's not afraid to stand up when he needs to. So it's like there's sort of same thing with like Sean's character. His parents are look like they're on the verge of a divorce. Like his mother's going to leave.
There you go, standard 80s trope.
So there's sort of like these darkness behind a lot of these characters that's not necessarily like in the forefront, Right. So it's not, it is a throwaway sort of silly comedy, but then it has these other things going on. And I think that's why people latch onto this movie, and hold on to it, because they can sort of feel the stuff going on behind.
But can we talk about, like, where is this supposed to be taking place?
In Louisiana.
Okay, because all of a sudden we got swamps, and yet then there's it was all over the place. I didn't pick up on the Louisiana.
And of course, Frankenstein's box is conveniently labeled Frankenstein.
Right. That's Frankenstein, by the way.
Just so you know, yes. That's who's in there.
Yes, do not open.
Now, and I suppose that the other monsters besides Frankenstein, we've got Wolfman, we've got Gillman, we've got.
Well, the Gillman was just hanging out in the swamps, right? He was just. Well,
I would assume that they are converging on Louisiana because Dracula is somehow summoning them for this task that he's partaking on. And of course, Van Helsing failed miserably at the beginning of the movie.
Right.
Oh yeah, the opening scroll and says they blew it.
Which was so reminiscent of the Evil Dead vortex.
Yeah.
But the special effects were almost like exactly the same.
Yeah, basically.
So I love, that Phoebe's the one who initially meets Frankenstein's monster, and then she introduces him to the boys who all run away. And I love hearing her tiny little voice, because she's only 5 years old, and she goes, "Come on, guys, don't be chicken shit."
Right. Good old family movie. And that's, we talk about these monsters, and right, they couldn't secure the rights, or they didn't want to for the.
No, they shopped this to Universal first.
Universal said no.
So I think it was written with the actual creature from the Black Lagoon and the Universal Wolfman.
But as a kid, they are. Though you can't stray too far from that formula. Yeah, the Gillman does not look exactly like the creature from the Black Lagoon, but he's still a freaking cool design. Stan Winston, by the way.
And they called the creature the Gillman in a lot of the the publicity. So
I mean, Dracula's Dracula. You put a flat head on the monster, or a round head, or they did go not the bolts on the neck, but they're up on his temples.
Yeah.
But it's still Frankenstein's monster.
But
the mummy's the mummy. How else can you change up a mummy?
But then the Wolfman just shows up. So in Louisiana, maybe because of also the Dracula pull that suddenly
it must be there. Right. Yeah.
And they didn't really do much with that character. I was a little disappointed because you had Laszlo. Laszlo was the Wolfman.
Yes, I know, and you never really picked up on that. That's right, you brought that up last week. Some real genius.
But yeah, it's funny though, like Sean is supposed to be the leader of the group, and he does almost nothing overall, besides get the diary and then sort of shout at everybody and say, we have to get rid of Dracula. I mean, he has the cool treehouse, but like I said,
cool treehouse.
Like Rudy makes the stakes, the silver bullets. He steals the archery equipment. Horace actually is the one who kicks Wolfman in the nards.
Yep. The Wolfman got nards.
He burns Dracula with the pizza. Pete the dog gets the mummy's bandage, and Rudy shoots it so that Rudy kills the mummy. He kills all the brides.
He only killed 2. What happened to the third?
Well, I mean, I guess he killed them all. He killed the third
They showed him taking out 2. The third was still left on the loose.
Well, and he also saved him from the bullies at the beginning of the movie.
Right. And then Rudy, again, kills the werewolf with the silver bullet. It's like, you guys would be dead without Rudy.
Yep.
Who else was waiting for the bullies to get shot? When Horace has the shot.
That's it. Now we got to take them all out.
And they're so mean. They won't even let him in the building, you know? Right. And then Horace is the one who actually kills the Gill Man. Like Sean and Patrick really does nothing except for make the business cards.
So somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
But the elephant in the room here, there's a lot of homophobic slurs.
Yes, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
Spoken by the heroes.
Yeah.
So that put a bad taste in my mouth from the beginning, and I didn't really like these kids after that. I liked Phoebe. I thought she was my favorite.
Phoebe, especially her relationship with the monster.
And poor Horace, he's not Horace until the very end. He's just fat kid. Until the end.
And he corrects him, yeah.
So it was kind of, these kids are mean-spirited, so it's not like the warm fuzzy that you get from Goonies or even Stand By Me.
No, but the Goonies still, they still took pokes at each other, but not to that level.
Yeah, and I can envision these kids being bullies themselves. Like, these are the kids I tried to stay away from.
They're going to school the next day that, we're the ones who vanquished the monsters bow before us.
But talking about the cast of monsters, on the other hand, Tom Noonan as Frankenstein.
Yep.
Because, it's all over the bonus features, is in order for this movie to work, you had to buy into the relationship between Frankenstein and Phoebe.
Yeah.
And in order to get that, the welling up at the end when Frankenstein goes off into the vortex. And you do. And it's and she's so good too.
Oh, absolutely. For a little girl like that, yeah. Even at the end when she has a confrontation with Dracula, I guess he never really showed up on set with the eyepieces in because he didn't want to freak the kids out. So when he hisses at her and just, give me the anna, you bitch, and she screams, like that was a genuine scream because he had never seen him with those contacts in.
I actually had heard Ashley Banks said that she wasn't actually there when.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when he says the line.
Okay, because you didn't want to curse in front of him.
When he actually said the line,
shit.
Yeah, when he actually said the line, she wasn't on set. I mean, a lot of the kids talked about how they had to go to school and they were little kids and there's a limited amount of time they could spend on set. Ashley was only 5, so I think she can only spend like 3 hours. So every time they were on set it was like try to get as much material as possible and then figure out ways to shoot around without the kids being there because they, there's limitations on child actors and homework and all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, really, Phoebe is ultimately the hero of the movie because she and Scary German Guy do the hard work opening the portal with the amulet.
Right. Now, why can't one of the boys read? I assume that they're virgins.
I know.
Well, I wrote that in my notes. Technically, they're all virgins. So you really don't have to look too far.
And it was really disturbing to give the thing to Phoebe. I'm like, you shouldn't even be thinking of that way.
And that's not even, is she a virgin? Why, yes, she is.
It's almost like virgins can only be girls.
Well, apparently, that's exactly,
Right. And it was funny because my son actually said something about that. He said, "Oh, aren't they all virgins?"
Yes, right.
And then he mentioned Hocus Pocus. The virgin character is a boy who accidentally brings the witches back to life. And Henry was going, "How come the boys can't be the virgins? They are in Hocus Pocus."
Right. And then the army comes in at the end. It's like
because Eugene sent the note.
The army comes in. Tanks come rolling down the streets. What the Sam Hill is going on here?
That's total kid logic there.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'll send a letter,
Yep.
Army guys, come quick.
Yeah.
And the
We
Army
got
guys
nothing better
actually...
to do. You got monsters in your
It's like,
backyard? We'll
the
be
message.
right there.
It's like the message in a bottle that he
Right.
throws out, and they get it.
And I think Burger King must have paid some serious
That
product
was
placement.
that was definite product placement.
Right? That's like right up there with the Marlboro truck and Superman, too. Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been your dream when you were a kid to have a house that could see to the drive-in?
Yeah,
that was great.
Brilliant.
I love that
overlooking.
scene.
Yep, overlooking the drive. You could tell it was split screen, but still, it was just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and he's grousing that he has to stay home. It's like, you just go up on the roof,
correct.
see the movie.
Like, that is the coolest thing.
Tap into the AM station. You're good to go.
Now, who did Dracula steal Frankenstein from on that plane? What was that plane? Was that an army plane, or where was Frankenstein going?
I don't know. It was some kind of cargo plane, because the pilots were like talking about how it was a good job because they didn't have to deal with any customers.
Yeah, and then you make some noise. I thought they were all dead back there.
Somebody ordered Frankenstein is going to be very upset when he doesn't show up.
He didn't come. They're still trying to track him. UPS. Where is he? My kids, I let my kids watch this really early, and when I sat down to watch it the other night, I asked Sky if they wanted to join me, and the one thing that came away was not even the Wolfman has nards, but the creature stole my Twinkie. that was the one takeaway from this movie all those years ago. Yeah, is that the one where the creature takes my Twinkie? I'm like, yeah, good talk. Yes.
Andre Gower, who plays Sean, actually made a documentary that did the festival circuit last year and the year before, called Wolfman's Got Nards.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And it's about the fandom around
that's cool.
Monster Squad. And it actually played here at the Music Box, of course, as part of their Cinepocalypse festival. But it did like a whole festival circuit. I was hoping that it would end up like on streaming or, maybe as part of like a DVD release or something, but it doesn't seem to be available yet. But, the film like really didn't do well, like I mentioned earlier, in the theaters. And one of the things I was reading about this, in the UK, this was rated 15, which means it really missed its target audience. The UK has much, much more strict rules especially about violence in movies. And they deemed this film too violent for anyone under 15. And the article that I was reading in was about an appearance that Andre Gower and Ryan Lambert were doing as part of the anniversary. And kids who had come with their parents who were younger than 15 to see the movie for this special appearance could not go into the movie.
What?
Even though they were with their parents, because the film is rated 15, and if you are not 15, like, you are not going in. Luckily for those kids, they got to hang around with the cast in the lobby, who apparently very nicely entertained them. But I was shocked, like.
So the parents just go in and leave the kid.
No. The parents
Sucks
stayed
to be
with their
you,
kids.
son. We'll see you in 2 hours.
That's crazy to me that, you can't even go into the movie with your parents.
Right. Yeah.
I know. Even for NC-17 here, they let you in if you've got a guardian, right?
Right. I think no. NC-17, I think, is nobody under 17.
Because I got into Day of the Dead with my father, and that was
rated NC-17?
That was rated X or X. But I got in. I don't know if it was not rated or NC-17, but it was not R.
It might have been unrated.
It might have been unrated then. Okay.
Because a lot of, you have to submit your film to the MPAA if you want the rating. It's some people just choose to forego the rating.
Right. Or the ticket taker just didn't care, which
no, that's usually the case.
NC-17 is no one under 17 admitted. Yeah.
Period.
Period. Right. With or without a parent. Rated R, I think, is with the guardian. Yeah. So this film, just really didn't find its audience. I think honestly, the release of The Lost Boys probably hurt it too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
You know?
because as you said, they were just weeks apart.
But in the intervening years, it's been the kind of film that's sort of found its audience, and like people watch it with their kids. Like, I've watched it with my son. Jeff talked about watching it with his kids. Yeah, it's just one of those movies that, I think it was one of the last of its kind from the 80s. These sort of like kid movies, I can't really think of anything after 1987. Can you?
That's like a kid's horror
That's like
movie.
the top of my head,
well, that's
no.
like a Goonies or Stand By Me and E.T. This thing where like the kids sort of have, like I said, sort of the secret world and their own adventure. The parents are not a part of that, because I think that, the zeitgeist sort of was moving away from, letting your kids run around all day. And
I mean, you get like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Or Sandlot, or, throwbacks.
But the parents were large in that movie. They weren't.
And Sandlot isn't set.
No, it's not.
Time.
It's set previously, but I'm sure that people are yelling at us right now. What about this? What about this?
Yeah.
And but no, I can't think of it.
I can't think of anything else. I think this is one of the last movies from the 80s.
Maybe Little Monsters. That would have been The Kiss of Death. Fred Savage and Howie Mandel.
How old was?
Horrible.
What year did that movie come
89.
out? Okay, I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, and I don't remember. It wasn't. Yeah, don't try to remember it.
And I would just like to mourn the passing here of Sean's father's partner, who was one of the more likable characters, who gets blown up in the car.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Detective Saper. Yeah, because he's always like, I'm a very good policeman. I did this thing.
Yeah.
Now, when they pull up and Dracula's got the dynamite in his hand, he radios in, we've got a 1013 here. Does that mean Dracula with a stick of dynamite?
Yes, correct. Yes, that's exactly what a 1013 is. 1013. Yep.
Random trivia. When the dad is standing there with the gun pointed at Dracula, there's an out-of-focus house across the street behind him, behind the dad, and that is Murtaugh's house from Lethal Weapon.
Oh, nice.
And he didn't appear in the movie because literally he is too old.
That's right. Definitely too old.
Right. Oh, I'm getting too old for this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I did read Dustin Diamond and Liam Neeson both had scenes that were cut from this.
I can imagine there's actually a lot of stuff that's cut from this. Because,
well, Liam Neeson was going to be cast, right, as Dracula, and they passed him over.
Is that where he was, as Dracula? Dustin Diamond, I understand. Screech.
Screech,
yeah.
Okay.
From Saved by the Bell. You didn't recognize that name?
No, it took me a second.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was entertaining.
Cost $12 million, and it made not quite $4 million.
Yep.
Bummer. It's more than made up for it now.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Sure, they're getting residual checks regardless.
All right. So what kind of buckets would we give it?
I'm curious about what you think, Jim, because this is
because this is your first exposure.
I think I was a little bit off-put by the
kids,
by the kids. So I enjoyed it. I appreciated the whole appropriation of the Universal monsters. So I liked the Gill-Man and the Wolfman and all that stuff. But on a whole, I'd probably give it like 2.5.
I mean, that's like totally understandable if you have no time.
Yeah, I don't have a history with it.
Yeah, you have like nothing where you're like thinking of it, in a nostalgic way. And Ryan Lambert was never your boyfriend.
That's because he never returned Jim's fan mail.
I didn't know he was a thing. I'd never heard of him.
That's because we were out of the loop at that point.
You guys were,
it wasn't.
The other thing about his character, he was blackmailing the sister with naked pictures.
It's true. That too. The whole set. We didn't talk about that stuff.
And her brother was too.
The camera. There's a lot of salacious stuff going on, like you said, just under the surface of this movie. I'll give it 3. I enjoyed it.
You give it higher if you want.
No. When have I ever let you?
Yes, like when have I let you ever influence me?
You may talk me up or down on certain movies, but by and large, no. I mean, I've seen it. Like I said, I own it. I've shared it with my kids or whatever. But I much more enjoyed The Lost Boys for sure.
I would agree with that statement.
Yes, I'm going to say 3.5 because I remember it fondly, and because there's still a lot of things that I like about it and can still appreciate as an adult. Although, like Jim mentioned, like some of the language and stuff, that was what I was talking about last week with Real Genius, where Real Genius doesn't really have this. But so many comedies from the 80s, especially like with the gay slurs, are ridiculous. Well,
Yeah.
not just comedies from the 80s. We were watching The Departed, and then the first 10 minutes.
I had a spirited debate last night about The Departed.
I hope that you came down firmly on the side of Infernal Affairs.
Damn straight I did. I said, well, because it was being lauded as like this brilliant, because this guy Boston the whole, and I'm just like, well, you do realize that it was a remake of.
Oh, so it wasn't based on our episode. This argument.
No, this guy didn't even know we had a podcast until probably 2 hours into our conversation. No, we were just nerding out, talking movies.
And did he know about Infernal Affairs?
No. No.
So you set him straight, right?
I did. Doesn't mean he's going to run right out and watch it and be like, I've been wrong this whole time. This movie sucks. I said, when you realize, but yeah, that was the catalyst for the whole, I have a podcast.
I had that conversation this week as well, just because of my mask. I had the TMI mask on.
Yep.
And, what's that? And of course, I have a podcast.
Walking billboard. Speaking of which, if you want a TMI mask, you can actually go to our TeePublic page. I think they're like $10 now. Aren't they like 20% off?
They were doing a 20% off sale this week. Yeah.
/ movie nerd. Show your love. I wear mine loud and proud.
Be safe and advertise us at the same time.
That's right. The space for sale, basically, is what it come down to. So that was fun. In 1987.
So are we ready for our confessional now?
I think, because this will be another hour.
Confessionals.
Based on last week's episode. We
I'm
hit
gonna
every
keep my
freaking
mouth
song
shut.
movie. No, I thought it was fun. Because it's just, you can't talk like just top 2 songs. Anyways.
Christina's got to lead us off.
Yeah.
No, one of you guys actually has to go first because I forgot about the confessional.
You did?
What?
I didn't even look anything up.
Miss, I'm ready to go at 9:00. Let's go.
I forgot that we do the confessional on this show.
It is only in the name of the show.
Yeah, first you started to write your book, and then you're like, I got a podcast to do.
I know. Seriously.
Like 4th on the list.
This is like writer on a deadline brain. Like I can only think about one thing, and it's that I have to finish this book. So I thought I was completely prepared for today, and I just remembered the confessional right before you mentioned it.
Nice. All right. Well, Jim, you could go first because I'll probably write right off.
I don't have as much as I did for 1985 because, as I said before,
right? 87.
87 was like the nadir of the 80s. The prime years for the 80s for me was up until 1985. Because that was when, like, new wave, like Duran Duran was the biggest band on the planet, like up until then. And then obviously after A View to a Kill, the original 5 disbanded, and it wasn't the same. Even though they continued on, it just wasn't the same as it used to be. 87, the new wave kind of lost control of popular music, and then it became like a more metal-oriented world. Like you got your Poison, you got your hair glam bands.
Yeah, your hair bands.
Like Bon Jovi is a good example. They started to dominate the charts, and I started to lose interest at that point in popular music. I stopped listening to Casey Kasem's American Top 40. There just wasn't enough for me. But having said that, there were some bright spots. I was looking up to see what was out that year. Joshua Tree, U2, was the album of the year, and they were just like the shining beacon in this sea of crap that was all around them in 87. So U2 was a huge exception to this rule. I loved Unforgettable Fire. That is probably still up. Octung Baby, Unforgettable Fire, those two kind of seesaw as my favorite U2 album. But at the time, Joshua Tree was just like nothing else because they had embraced the roots of like blues flavored Americana type music. And it was just such a new thing coming from them. It was almost like a novelty because it wasn't what you were expecting really from U2. And it was so good. And they seemed so at home with it. The album was immediate. It was listening to it. It was just like you had heard these songs. So that was a big deal. Sting, Nothing Like the Sun, came out that year, and that was also, subverting expectations because Dream of the Blue Turtles was not like The Police, but it was kind of a transitional album where you still had that flavor. And Fortress Around Your Heart, I thought, was very Police-like in terms of songs from that record, but Nothing Like the Sun kind of took him into a whole other sophisticated direction. And a lot of people, I didn't like it, that were Police fans that I knew, but I accepted it for what it was. Prince Sign of the Times is a big one as well.
Yeah.
And I started to dip my toes into my alternative obsession with music for the masses and Depeche Mode. Of course, I knew People Are People from a few years back, but Never Let Me Down Again was the hook for me. So I got that Depeche Mode album that year in 87. And 87 also was the first year that I got a CD player. I ingested all the Beatles albums at once. I think I probably bought them within like 3 weeks of each other. And where I had Sgt. Pepper before and a couple other random albums, I never had the whole catalog. So I was heavily into the Beatles in 1987. There were some standalone songs that I liked, like Breakout by Swing Out Sister. I had the 45 too. Venus, Bananarama, I had the 45 too. Lips Like Sugar, Echo and the Bunnymen was out that year.
Sugar.
So there wasn't all Drek, but yeah, for the most part, I wasn't into what was going on musically in 87. Yeah. TV shows, I'm going to give a shout out right now to the series Friday the 13th. Which has nothing to do with Jason Voorhees or Camp Crystal Lake, but rather it's about two cousins who inherit an antique store from their evil past uncle. And the antiques in the store all have like a supernatural history to them. So the show, Friday the 13th, it's kind of like an X-Files before X-Files, where they're going on these excursions, and each episode revolved around a new supernatural item that by the end of it, they take it back to the antique store and kind of put the genie in a bottle and keep it in their basement.
Was this on UPN? What channel?
It was a syndicated show. It was either PIX or WOR.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it was like a Monster of the Week episode, but it was like an item of the week. And it was kind of like The Conjuring. It was kind of based on that type of an idea where they were collecting all these possessed artifacts and keeping them in their antique store. And Beauty and the Beast. I like that show.
Oh, that's right. Perlman. My dad was into that.
I watched that show with my mom. One of the shows that we would watch together, Beauty and the Beast. But that was...
Ron Perlman, baby.
Well, Ron Perlman, but that was... I was talking
Linda
earlier
Hamilton, right?
about
Linda
how
Hamilton?
I was... Yep. How I liked anything that had a fantasy element in it. And, you know, if there was a TV show that had a fantasy element in it, I would just latch onto it immediately. Do you know what episode of the Beauty and the Beast I remember, Jim? I don't know if you remember it. It's the Halloween episode, which is like the one time of the year when you can come out.
Oh, yeah.
And walk among people.
Yeah.
Great makeup, dude.
And of course, for me, probably for most of us, it was Linda Hamilton was the gateway into that show. Sarah Connor. So, yeah.
Yeah. What about movies? Any other movies in 87?
Untouchables was the big one I remember. Predator, 87. And, but besides that, I'm not thinking of much else.
RoboCop,
that's right.
RoboCop, it was sold out. I was living in Queens at the time, and I went with my buddy, and we were forced to sit in the very front row, which shouldn't even exist, because you're straining to look up at the screen. And 5 minutes in, my buddy fell asleep and snored through the whole thing.
RoboCop?
The RoboCop. Yeah.
You didn't just jab him in the ribs at some point?
Yeah, I let him sleep. He was my ride. So, Inner Space was another big one.
Oh, yeah.
Inner Space was... I'm going through this list, and I'm like, I must have gone to the movies like 4 times during the week. This was also college.
That was 87? I'm thinking that was earlier.
Unless I did my homework.
Maybe you're right. No, I'm thinking of Dreamscape. Dreamscape.
Oh, that was earlier, right?
That was 84, I think.
That was also, we had an episode devoted to Masters of the Universe, which was a huge disappointment. I had to go all the way down to Elmira to go see this movie. I dragged a bunch of family members with me, and we were very disappointed.
That's a perfect equivalent to music in 87 is Masters of the Universe for cinema in 87.
Yeah. As far as TV shows, Star Trek The Next Generation premiered.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, again, we were one of the few dorms that actually had a television in our room. And Star Trek loomed large. So that was pretty cool. Married with Children, I think, also premiered that year.
I think you're right.
And that was like Fox out of the gate. Like Fox was like your fourth network. And they were, I thought Herman's Head was later. It was like 89. But I was thinking like all those Fox shows that came out, because I think Simpsons was 89. So a lot of those stuff that I thought was earlier came up later. But My Two Dads was another big show that was on TV at the time.
I saw quite a few episodes of My Two Dads.
Yeah.
Inexplicably. I don't know why I would have watched that, but I did.
It looked like I didn't watch much television or music. I mean, I know I was entrenched in music, and it was a lot of pop culture. I mean, not pop culture, but, I brought it up last week, the new wave stuff once I got into college. But I'm looking at some of these albums. I probably didn't buy albums. I was too busy buying comic books at the time. There was a couple, Midnight Oil, Beds Are Burning was a big, huge, that album, Diesel and Dust was huge coming out of Australia.
See, I hated Midnight.
Did you hate them?
I hated them.
In Excess was another one.
Think about something else, dude. I hated In Excess.
Really?
In Excess,
Wow.
It's like I rage when that comes on the radio now.
Wow.
I don't know why. Know why.
I'll mention one individual song because it's probably like my quintessential 80s song, which is Heart and Soul by Depeche.
Oh, yeah. I had the 45.
love this song. Yeah, now Depeche
is,
because not only is it an awesome, awesome song, but Depeche was a Vulcan character on Star Trek. So if you're going to name your band after an obscure Vulcan female, then I'm all in. So that to me is like my greatest. If you had to say the one song you had to listen to on a desert island for the rest of your life, day in, day out, that would be Depeche.
Heart and Soul.
Heart and Soul.
I'll tell you, the biggest disappointment musically for me of 87 was Bad, Michael Jackson.
Oh, Michael Jackson's follow. But that's like any follow-up album. I mean, you can't follow up friggin' Thriller.
Yeah. It's true. It's there. I don't know what I was expecting, but I didn't like it.
It's lightning in a bottle, man. I mean, he still had how many number one hits came off Bad?
Yeah, I know. It's
sure,
like every song was a single.
Right. Yeah. And then Weird Al did even worse. He did a spoof on it. Yeah.
That's right.
But Bad had Smooth Criminal.
Annie, are you okay? Are you okay, Annie?
Which is a great song.
So anyways, the other two movies I wanted to bring up, which Back to the Beach, which is not a great movie by any means, but it was the whole Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon.
Mm-hmm.
And they just were spoofing all that stuff from the 50s, but they brought in like the cast from Gilligan's Island was on there. Pee Wee Herman was in it. Just stupid. I haven't seen that movie in years, but I do remember being tickled pink watching it in the theater. Adventures in Babysitting. That was 87.
Chicago movie.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. Yes. Yeah, Thor. That's probably our first Marvel superhero mentioned. And so Harry and the Hendersons.
I'm
Okay,
ready.
what do you?
Okay.
You're ready? Okay.
I got Jim all bent out of shape about friggin' Midnight Oil and In Excess.
Well, I'm going to mention In
Reach.
Excess because I loved In Excess.
All right, I'll back you on that. Yeah.
And I had the Need You Tonight shirt with all the lyrics on it.
Mhm.
And I was still wearing that when I went to high school a year later. Loved In Excess. Obviously, like I was into U2, like everyone else in the world. I mean, I really liked. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. That was like, my favorite song off of that album. And I'm just gonna do like top 5 songs from that year that I could think of. I Heard a Rumor by Bananarama. I loved that song. You Got the Look by Prince.
You got the look.
And I was not like, I sort of like waxed and waned with Bruce Springsteen, but I remember I really liked Brilliant Disguise, which was not a huge hit for him, but that was a song that I liked a lot. I didn't watch a ton of TV. I watched Beauty and the Beast. That's really the only thing that I remember watching around that time because I was really reading a lot when I was 13. I spent the vast majority of my time reading. That was a very significant year for me reading-wise because basically up to that point I'd read like everything fantasy that I could get a hold of. Stephen King released The Eyes of the Dragon that year, and my parents gave it to me for my 13th birthday. And I had never read a Stephen King book before. And it's a fantasy. It's really not a horror novel. And so it ended up being like a gateway drug to Stephen King books because after that I started reading like just anything I could get. So I remember I went and I read Christine, I read Misery, I read The Stand. So it ended up opening up this whole world of books that I really hadn't read before. Because of that, I started reading Dean Koontz. I think I spent, I don't know how many Dean Koontz novels I read in 1987, a lot. Movie-wise, Princess Bride was definitely my favorite movie in 1987. And again, it was because of the book, because I had read the book by William Goldman, and then I saw the movie, and I loved the movie. One of the few times I ever went to the movies with my dad when I was a kid. My dad really didn't go to movies. Like my mom would always take us if we went to movies. He wanted to go see Empire of the Sun, the Spielberg film. Yep. And my dad took me to see Empire of the Sun. So I remember seeing that with my dad that year. And Raising Arizona came out that year, and I was crazy about that movie. Like once it came out, especially once it came out on cable, and like I recorded it with the VCR, I think I watched it 150 times. I loved
yeah, I did as well.
Raising Arizona. But I'm trying really hard to limit it to things I watched or knew about at the time. Because there were definitely a lot of things from 87 that I discovered later. Like I said, I was young, so my parents wouldn't take me to a rated R movie, so I did not see Predator in the theater. I did not see RoboCop in the theater, but later when they were out on video and all my friends were watching it, and everyone I knew was talking about the guy getting his arm shot off in Predator, that I watched a lot of those things later. When they were available on video, not when they came out initially.
There you go. Well, we've exhausted 87.
The summer of 87. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Not as exciting as the summer of 85, apparently.
But next week we are going a little bit further back in time.
We're going back in time.
It's Jeff's pick. So, Jeff, let's talk about what we're doing next week.
Wow. We are going to be going back to 1984, the summer of 1984. So Christina was what, 6?
10. I was a very tiny person in 84, so my memories of 84 are going to be a lot different from yours.
Well, I'm hoping that you'll like my choices, because I think one of them you actually mentioned, and I decided that this is what we're going to talk about, which is Val Kilmer's very first movie, Top Secret, hidden gem. If you have not seen this movie, it defies description, and yet we're going to do our best next week. We will try our best to break this down, and then we're going to pair it up with The Last Starfighter, which is I'm very excited for.
I can't wait to watch both of these again. It's been years since I've seen either of these.
I didn't realize I had Top Secret on disc. I was going through looking for something else. I was looking for Monster Squad, and I'm like, oh, look, I have it. So I'm all set, because I also have the 20th anniversary Blu-ray of Last Starfighter.
Yeah, my library had the Blu-ray, so I've got the Blu-ray waiting downstairs.
Exciting just to talk about that CG action sequence. So that's it. So 1984. So we're gonna finish out our summer of series in 1984.
Yeah. I hope you come back.
Yes, I hope I come back. If I go back to 1984, I may not come back. I may just stay there.
Take your lighter so you can put your hands up and sing the chorus.
I'm going to raid Corey Haim's closet. I'm going to raid Corey Haim's closet. Corey Haim. I think I donated all those clothes.
So with that,
all right, kids. Yeah, that's it. We're done. We've exhausted this year.
Bye.
Wow, that was it.
That was it. We're done.
Wow, wait, that was the worst. That was the worst sign off ever. Horrible.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Step over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, tmiconfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
Okay, I'm back. Thanks for sticking around. And as you are doubtless aware, next week's episode will not be 1984's Last Starfighter and Top Secret. But by all means, if you want to hear that one again, go back to episode 128 and check it out. Next week's new episode will be featuring Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. So this is the new movie version that is on Disney+. We are chomping at the bit to talk about it. And along with it, just as exciting, we are covering for the first time Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So once again, thanks for listening to this TMI Rewind.
Michael.
I'm leaving.